Hello and welcome to Inner Worlds, Outer Stories, where we talk about movies and pop culture and stories and how it relates to our own spiritual journeys. I'm Kristina Wiltsee, I'm a life alchemist, and today we are going to be talking about everything, everywhere, all at once, and why it is just such a brilliant depiction of the inner villains, which is a lot of what we've been talking about, which are these arcs and how we actually become better people in 9 different villains in 9 different ways. And it is just so beautiful with the metaphysics. And so, first of all, let's just look at the movie itself. It was created by the Daniels, Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert. The movie was originally created with a male protagonist as a response to The Matrix. And when Jackie Chan, who was supposed to be the original lead, turned it down, they changed it into a mother and they deepened the story. And therefore, Michelle Yeoh was able to come in and step in and create an Oscar-winning performance. And it was created in their style, which is maximalist, according to them. But it was actually created in an effort to try and combat this overwhelm and real anxiety associated with the internet about all the things that you can possibly be. And that is directly what inspired the multiversal format, was that it was very much so about ADHD and however it looks, which is why it's so brilliant when we start to look at the villains, exactly why that makes so much sense, because the main character of Evelyn is the perfect depiction of ADHD in the way that she deals with it and the way that she then overcomes it. There were a number of different influences for this particular movie, including The Matrix, but also Wong Kar-wai, and particularly In the Mood for Love was one that actually inspired this. There's other thematic influences: Eastern philosophy, absurdism, Nietzsche, also generational trauma and Asian American identity was a huge part of this. It was made for only $25 million, if you can believe that, and only 5 people were on the VFX team. Ke-Huy Quan didn't act for 20 years before this because he didn't have any particular roles. He was a child star, and his turn in this, he actually learned martial arts for it, and he won his Oscar for Best Supporting Actor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the Academy for this honor of a lifetime. Thank you to my mom for the sacrifices she made to get me here.
Most people know him from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom or from The Goonies. And so in terms of its reception, it won 7 awards in 2023, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress, and Best Supporting Actor and Actress, with Jamie Lee Curtis, Ke-Huy Quan, and Michelle Yeoh.
This is a beacon of hope and possibilities. This is proof that dreams dream big and dreams do come true.
Let's get into the multitude of different villains that we see here. And what we're going to be talking about today is the Hungry Shapeshifter, which is the Loki. It was called the Many-Faced Gods. Everything is evolving in this deck as we do it. That is Evelyn's character. We also have Waymond's character, who is the Traveler. He is the evolution of the eternal child, which is also a really wonderful thing to look at, because we've looked a lot at villains, and it's lovely to be able to look at a legend. Waymond is a legend of the eternal child. He is the Traveler. Jobu Tupaki, who is actually the Invisible Destroyer, which we just dropped a video on a couple of weeks ago when we talk about the never-ending story in Tomorrowland. We also have Gong Gong, who is a perfect obedient critic, as well as Deirdre, who is played by Jamie Lee Curtis in this, and that, as the IRS, she is the righteous bully. She is acting on behalf of the IRS to try and show everybody how righteous she is, in fact, and that she is the arbiter of whether or not people are going to have a difficult time or a good time.
It just doesn't matter how many times I see it, I'm just so...
All right, so let's start with Evelyn, the main character, the perfect representation of ADHD. Evelyn is a representation in this movie, in this particular dimension that we find her in, of the version of her in which everything has gone wrong. Spiritually, this is such a strong implication in the fact that we recognize that she has the potential to become anything, and yet she didn't. And so in her ability, the fact that she never went into a single identity meant that she could be every identity, which is why she is in fact the chosen one. She is the Neo of this particular line. And the arc of the Hungry Shapeshifter is one that moves from a place in which you're willing to consume other identities in order to be able to gain attention for yourself. Then the successful antagonist is the thief, who you're stealing other people's identities. And you're also, usually the thief is very trying to steal time. They're often trying to steal a life, like a very risky type of life. They're risk seeking. The defensive, which is the wounded child of this, which is a very active fighting form of wounded child. The entertainer, which is the covert form. So they're always the best person at a party because they're always going to entertain you with karaoke or whatever it is. And then the fabricator is the hero, and the legend of this arc is the presence. And so let me just show you how Evelyn moves through this. Evelyn is the perfect example of the hungry shapeshifter. The hungry shapeshifter moves from a person who is always seeking attention by taking on everybody else's identities, which she does truly as the inciting incident in this entire movie is her going to the IRS and being told by Deirdre, the auditor, that all of the things that she's written off are not actually related to her business, her karaoke machine, her hobbies. All of her hobbies that she seeks, which is very much related to the ADHD aspect of her, are not actually hobbies. They need to be taken off and that they can't be write-offs. Or they are her hobbies, and they should be write-offs.
I was just hoping you could enlighten me as to how, as a laundromat owner, a karaoke machine could constitute a business expense.
I am a singer.
Once Evelyn gains the ability to jump between different universes, you start to see how hungry she gets to be them. At one point, once she gets to be in her kung fu and she has her kung fu capability, she goes up to Waymond and basically destroys him because she wants to always be in this other life. That is the worst version of Evelyn once she is given this power by Alpha Waymond and her in another world. We don't see her come out of this more villainous thing, whether it's her as the hungry shapeshifter in which she's consuming and she doesn't care what happens to her other lives, the thief in which she's just kind of previewing those other lives, or her in her state in which she's constantly being defensive about how she doesn't deserve any blame for anything. She is constantly defensive of her position as whoever it is that she's the ultimate victim. She's allowed to say, yeah, I've had such a difficult life. This is such an awful laundrette. I can't possibly do anything. And she becomes ultimately defensive and she lashes out at everyone around her, whether it's Joy, whether it's Waymond, and then of course she never does anything to her father because her father is the ultimate one that she had to be defensive against. We see all of these different iterations of her life in which she chose to react with different strategies based on different outcomes. That's why this movie is so brilliant, because it shows how a different strategy can change the entire trajectory of our life. It could be a different decision, but ultimately what we recognize is the decision fuels the strategy, and the strategy then changes the life path entirely. The covert of this one is the entertainer. We see that a little bit. We see that a little bit with the way that, the implication that she has all these hobbies that we don't really get to see, but that's the Evelyn that exists in all the rest of the time. You can see that the entertainer is often come across and really is very superficial in the way that they see things. And so the way that she's wanting to have the party and to entertain everybody for the Chinese New Year, that is more the entertainer aspect of her, or how she's always kind of faking good that everything's okay. What we start to see in this is that Evelyn has to come into a moment. She dies in the one dimension, and she needs to be able to move, to go across to a new way of being. And she has to become the fabricator to do it. The key crux of the movie, right, that we see that key understanding of where Evelyn needs to shift is when she stops actually stealing everybody else's experiences, and she starts to recognize that it's not about her, it's actually about saving Joy. And so she recognizes that she's willing to sacrifice herself in some way. She's willing to basically use her skill of being able to take on all these different personas to try and align with Joy so that she can be in a similar place to Joy, right? And so we see her start to do this. And in the process of doing this, she's expanding her consciousness significantly. She's becoming the true Fabricator. But her role as the Fabricator and her hero turn is not fully realized until we see her and Waymond, and how Waymond basically makes the explanation of himself and says, this is why I always chose to not use violence or to not use hurt or anger. I chose to always use something that was positive. I chose to always use something that was humor or lightheartedness.
我想告诉你，如果有来生，我还是会选择和你一起报税，开心一点。
That's the way that you connect to people, not by trying to make yourself the victim, not by trying to draw attention to yourself or trying to steal other aspects of yourself from different dimensions. It's from using the ability of truly connecting with another person. That is where the true hero turn for Evelyn happens. And we see her no longer fight with her kung fu, which is something that she stole. She fights with her ability to connect with other people and to connect them with what their true desire is. And by doing that, she takes the attention off of herself. She puts the attention onto the other person, and that is the true hero turn for her. It isn't until the end that we see when she's finally confronting Joy, Jobu Tupaki, when she's actually trying to say, pull her back from the abyss, that we see Evelyn in the scene in the parking lot when Joy is going to the car, where she recognizes that the presence of being present in this particular dimension is the choice that she's making. She's choosing presence. That is the legend of this arc. That's the legend of the Hungry Shapeshifter, is that they choose to try and they go from stealing everybody else's attention, thunder, lives, to saying this life is good enough and I am good enough in this moment. Totally brilliant. Waymond. We already mentioned Waymond. Waymond is the eternal child, and yet he's not the villainous version of the eternal child. He is the legendary version of the eternal child. That arc, which is all about movement and expansion, you go to the Traveler. You go all the way to the Traveler. Think Doctor Who. The Doctor from Doctor Who is a perfect example of a traveler. Waymond is another example of it. Somebody who has gone through the arc of the eternal child recognizes that childish nature and that a positive attitude or a positive way of connecting with other people is absolutely worth it. And we see this in Waymond, and he is able to give his knowledge as the traveler to Evelyn in her moment of need.
I know you have a lot of things on your mind, but nothing could possibly matter more than this conversation we're having right now concerning the fate of every single world of our infinite multiverse.
And it's absolutely brilliant to see the depiction of eternal children, men in particular, Peter Pan, as they move through their arc and seeing the way that what they've actually attained as the skill for what they want to see.
Joy? Why do you look so stupid?
Ma'am.
Joy, Jobu Tupaki. Joy and Jobu Tupaki represent the invisible destroyer or the nothing. This one is a difficult representation just simply because of the fact that we can see how Jobu Tupaki was pushed by her mother in the Alpha universe to expand beyond. She was basically completely overwhelmed by all of so that's the wounded child of the particular arc of the Invisible Destroyer, is the overwhelmed. Joy became overwhelmed and became Jobu Tupaki. She became so overwhelmed by all the possibilities of what you could do and all the nihilistic experiences that she became the Invisible Destroyer.
What is the truth?
Nothing matters.
She created the everything bagel with the idea in mind that she wanted to ultimately destroy herself because she was not worth trying to live in so many dimensions at the same time. The wounding of being overwhelmed by Evelyn or by whatever is necessary, Jobu, in the form of Joy, has to come to the understanding that being and choosing one thing, despite being able to feel everything, having the sensitivity to feel everything, that it's okay to be embodied in this particular instance. That maybe despite knowing and feeling every multiverse, this is the right one. The one where you have your consciousness right now is okay, despite the fact that it feels debilitating sometimes, which we can all relate to. Deirdre is the righteous bully. The righteousness comes from the IRS and the ability to say, I am the arbiter of whether or not your life is awful or not.
Do you see these? You don't get one of these unless you've seen a lot of bullshit. Excuse my French.
And most of the time, obviously, Deirdre is taking on the role as one of the main antagonists that is fighting Evelyn and Waymond inside the IRS building. And, it's an interesting thing because obviously at the end, Evelyn seeks to connect with Deirdre through their hot dog fingers universe, right? To give the power back to Evelyn in that universe to love Deirdre because they are a couple in that relationship. And by Evelyn ceding the power back to that person in that universe, Deirdre and Evelyn can reconnect in that. And Deirdre and Evelyn can reconnect in the universe the second universe that we come across at the laundromat. Deirdre understands what it's like to feel the pain of divorce. She understands exactly what she did, and she's able to connect, and she's able to come through her arc, even if in a very short way, to surrender and to channel in what is the right thing to do, which is this understanding that she remembers the time when she was the pathogen. She remembers the time when she was the bad guy in a relationship, and to then move through her own arc to become the surrender, to become the hero, and to help Evelyn through this situation. And then finally, Gong Gong. Gong Gong is a representation of every single judgment that happens in ancestral and generational trauma. Gong Gong's judgment forces Evelyn in this particular relationship to deny that Joy has her girlfriend, to lie incessantly, to constantly try and deflect and to make Evelyn appear perfect. And Gong Gong is incapable. He's an antagonist because he's incapable of seeing that there's any ability to change the rules, despite that there is obviously something different that's happening this time. He's trying to keep everybody safe by following the rules, but he's not capable of doing that. And he ultimately needs to be destroyed because he needs to move through his own arc. He needs to move through his own arc in which he accepts anarchy. That is the hero of the obedient critic arc. And so I could say so much more about the nature of this particular movie, but I hope that gives you a preview. And if you want to know anything more about the rest of the villains, you can look here and it will tell you all more specifics about these villains. But knowing that this entire process and this entire experience of the villains is here to help us develop in ourselves. If you notice yourself in any of those characters, see the arc, go back and visit those videos about the arc or watch the movie again with this lens in mind. Thanks, guys. If you like us, we're trying to expand our channel. So please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment. Tell me you like it. Tell me you don't like it. Anyway, I really appreciate it. Thanks.